Hey there folks, Meteorologist Hunter McCullough here for Northern News Now. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Forecast, where we get to dive deeper into different aspects of the forecast that we don't normally have time for when we talk about this on air. It's stuff that we take for granted, such as when does our low temperature actually happen throughout the day? Just a trivial item when it comes to forecasting, and definitely something that, again, we don't really get to talk a whole lot about when we break stuff down on the actual air, because we get about 3 minutes to talk about what's actually happening in the forecast, and we can't dive deeper. This is perfect. We can go as long as we want in this setting, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. It's not too long, of course, but it's a few minutes of talking about when exactly our low temperature actually happens. And it may not be when you think it does during the 24-hour period here within a day. Typically, our low temperature happens at a certain time, and I'm going to be talking more about when that happens in this video. Take a look. Hey there folks, Meteorologist Hunter McCullough here for Northern News Now. I want to talk about an interesting phenomenon when it comes to our low temperature. So we've talked in a previous video about radiational cooling. Just a refresher on that, it's basically when we have clear skies, relatively calm winds, we need like a 2-mile-per-hour wind, and what happens at night is we see the heat at the surface radiate out to space, that is. It's a very efficient way to really cool off our temperatures, and it happens pretty often throughout the Northland. And so when we see that, we know it's going to be a cool night compared to what we're used to in the region. But when does our actual low temperature happen? You'd think that it would be right before sunrise. It makes the most sense. It's right before the sun comes up. Sun comes up and it starts heating everything. So it would happen right before sunrise for the most part. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. When is our lowest low temperature? This is from a couple days ago, October 14th. And you can see the list here. This is the date, this is the time, this is every 5 minutes at the Duluth International Airport. These are our temperatures, and these are our dew points. And what we're going to focus in specifically is when we see our lowest temperature, and that is right here. So you can see 7:30, 34 degrees, 7:35, 32. It dipped down 2 whole degrees here within 5 minutes and then jumped right back up, 7:40, 34 degrees. So when was sunrise during this time? On this day, on October 14th, when did sunrise happen? Well, let's see. 7:25 is when sunrise happened. So we go down to here, and you can see at 7:25 we were at 34 degrees. Well, then 5 minutes passed, 34 degrees. 5 more minutes passed. 10 minutes after sunrise, we saw our lowest temperature, and that was 32 degrees. And then it jumped back up, kept going. It stayed about the same for a while. And that makes sense, because once we get to a certain point, when we get close to our dew point, it takes a little longer to cool those temperatures. So we got pretty close to our dew point. That's why we didn't see fog, though, is because we didn't get to our dew point. Anyway, interesting, isn't it, that our low temperature happened after sunrise? You'd think it would happen right before sunrise. 7:25 was sunrise, 34 degrees. 7:35, 10 minutes after sunrise, 32 degrees. Why is that? On a typical day, we see our sunrise and our lowest temperature happen after sunrise usually. So why is that? Let's explain. Typical coldest temperature happens right after sunrise. So right before sunrise, what's happening? We're cooling down because there's no really element of heat in our region. Nearly coldest part of the day is right before sunrise. As that sun comes up, though, we see a last-minute thing happen before we start seeing the heat of the day start to move back into the Northland. We see a little bit of evaporation. There's water molecules within the air. And the second that sun comes up, it evaporates some of that. And what happens there is when things evaporate, when water evaporates, it cools the temperatures. And that's what happens right after sunset. For a split second, for a little bit anyway, maybe not a split second, a little longer than that, you see the sun come up, it evaporates that little bit of water, and it actually causes the temperature to cool down a little bit more. So that's what happens. The sun comes up, last minute evaporation cools that temperature down a little bit more. Similar, of course, to how sweat cools the body. This is the best way to relate evaporation to how it cools you. That's why our body sweats. Our body sweats, we have water on our skin, and then that evaporates away. And that's what causes us to cool down. and this is a whole nother video, but when it's humid outside, we can't see that, that sweat evaporate as efficiently. And that's why when it's humid and hot outside, it's dangerous for us humans, because we don't see that sweat on our skin evaporate away, cooling us off. Anyway, this is why we see the coolest temperature usually after sunrise here, is because of that last minute evaporation cools those temperatures down just a little bit more. There's a couple scenarios though, however, that would be causing this not to happen like this. And a couple of those scenarios would be, happen actually pretty common here, if we see a strong warm or a strong cold front happening overnight or in the early parts of the morning. It happens quite a bit in the winter, especially where we've got, for instance, a cold front that's moving into the Northland. And our highest temperature happens just after midnight. That's our high temperature. And then the rest of the morning we see that temperature falling. Sunrise happens, but the temperature continues to fall. So around mid-morning or so, 9 or 10 in the morning, that's when we see our low temperature, and that's because we got a strong cold front that moved through. Similar scenario for a strong warm front. So these are both scenarios where we would see the low temperature happen at another point in the day. If we're in, for instance, a cooler air mass, and we see the cooler temperature happen earlier on in the day, and then a warm front moves through, a strong warm front, we start to see those warmer temperatures. It can alter the exact time of when our coldest temperature happens. Cloud coverage as well. That we need the sun to evaporate the water droplets in the atmosphere. If we have cloud coverage in the morning, this can definitely tamper with that. So then we would probably see the coldest temperature right before sunrise, because we're not seeing that last minute evaporation happen if we have thick cloud coverage over us. A thunderstorm would also alter our temperature. If there was a thunderstorm right around sunrise, this would definitely alter our temperature as well. So a lot of different scenarios that would alter it. But for the most part, it's safe to bet that we are seeing that coldest temperature happen just after sunrise on a nice sunny day. And that's basically all I'm going to be talking about when it comes to that. It's a very interesting story here when it comes to our weather. Something that, you know, again, we don't really get to talk too much about in our normal weather, because it's just, we don't have enough time for this. So this is exactly what this type of show is made for, is going more in depth about why things that we take for granted happen. So there we go. That's a very interesting, hopefully, to you and to me as well, talking more about why our lowest temperature happens just after sunrise. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you for watching this video.